Hello again, it's Elliot here, and I have another 4K Blu-ray review for you today in the form of The Thing from John Carpenter. This has just been released by Universal in various parts of the world, and spoiler alert, it's an okay disc, it's decent, but there are some really important issues with this disc that I think are not being discussed everywhere. So I want to make people aware of that before they buy this disc, and that's what this review is going to be all about. So the picture quality, how does this disc look? Well, I must say it actually looks quite excellent. It's probably the best that I've ever seen this film look, and that's saying quite a lot because the Arrow Video version from a few years ago actually looked very good indeed. Now, that version was taken from a 4K restoration, even though it was only a standard 1080p Blu-ray, and I believe this new 4K disc is from that exact same restoration, so it's the same source material that they've used to create this disc. With this 4K disc, the clarity of the image is increased, so you see even more on the characters' faces and in the frozen landscape and the interior of the base in the film. The 4K presentation does differ in terms of colour timing from previous releases. I don't own the Scream Factory US release, and I have looked at comparisons online, and I believe the colour timing is quite different from that particular release, and it differs from the Arrow disc, and I think it has a really natural looking feel to it. I can't compare it to how this would have looked back in the 80s because I wasn't around and I didn't get to see it in theatres, but I think this film looks absolutely great on this disc. What I love most about watching 4K discs is the addition of HDR, and the HDR10 on this release really does look absolutely amazing. It's most noticeable in the darkest sequences in the film, so this is where you can see the black colours totally defined, there's no compression issues, and it just looks so clean. You see this in the exterior shots where you've got the black sky against the blue snow, and also towards the end of the film in the final sequence where there's fire in the image against the black sky. It looks totally amazing. So those were the sequences that stood out to me the most. There is a noticeable grain to the image, which I think is amazing. But for those people that hate grain, it isn't overbearing, so it's probably not going to make you sick just looking at the film. But, you know, I don't want to get into the grain discussion here, but it's a real issue how some people just don't get film grain. I'm not going to get into that, but the grain is there. I think it looks great, so that's that. That's basically all I have to say about the video. So on the whole, it looks really good. It looks better than the film has ever looked, really. One issue I did have, which I guess is in terms of video, is that my disc actually froze at a certain point in the film. And I went through it a few times and it freezes at this point every single time. So I thought, oh, perhaps I've just been unlucky with this particular disc. But then I went online on the forums and a lot of other people are having their disc freeze at a certain point. It's around the 95-minute mark in the movie, and it seems to only happen to people who have certain Blu-ray players. Now, my Blu-ray player is an Oppo UDP 203, and I hear that it's happening to people that have a Panasonic player as well. I don't know much about those players, I've not tested it on that, but for me it freezes every time at that 95-minute mark. I've read that some people seem to only be experiencing this with the collector's edition, but no, I've got the standard edition and it is happening to me on my player. So hopefully Universal make a statement about this and do a disc replacement program. If they don't though, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might have to get rid of the disc entirely. So it is a major issue. That is a major issue which really tarnishes the great video quality of the disc, and it really put a whole sour note on my viewing experience. Sadly, that is not the only bad thing about this release, because let's talk about the audio. So the film begins with the iconic Ennio Morricone theme music, and straight away I thought this doesn't quite sound right. There is a strange reverb to the music at the start of the film, and I had a look after watching the film, and this is indeed a new remastered or remixed audio track. So it isn't the same track from the old Arrow Video Blu-ray, which in my opinion sounded absolutely amazing. They really didn't have to change much with that at all, but they've gone in, done a new remix track for this film, and there are quite a few issues with this remix track. And again, I went online, checked the forums, and loads of other people are having the same issues with the audio track. I did check out some other reviews of this disc online, and certain other reviewers aren't having any issues with the audio on this disc at all. But for me, just certain things kept sticking out throughout the film and really took me out of the experience. It isn't just the music that has this weird reverb effect on it. There are certain parts in the film where some sound effects are mixed way too quiet. These are sound effects which, in previous incarnations of this film on disc, sounded loud and noticeable. But in this particular release, they are really quiet, and it's really strange. One of the examples is towards the middle of the film, or the latter half of the film. There's a sequence where the characters are throwing Molotov cocktails into various rooms of the base, and you hear them throwing the bottles into the room, and then when the bottles crash in the room, it's very quiet. And I guess someone has looked at this and gone, well, the sound is coming from inside another room, so it would sound quiet, but it's not meant to be, because in previous releases it's sounded loud and you can hear it. It's noticeably too quiet. There are some other instances where the thing is flailing its tentacles and snapping at stuff, and the effects of those snaps and whips are just quiet, and they stick out like a sore thumb, to me at least, and many other people who have said this online as well. So it's really bizarre. I don't get how this got through checks and stuff like that, because it's just not the best mix. It's not the best this film has ever sounded. And along with that freezing issue that I mentioned before, it really does put a damper on this whole release. Now, I know what's coming. People are going to say that I am nitpicking too much, that I'm going into too much detail, I'm looking for things to complain about. That is not the case. If I didn't notice these things, I wouldn't mention them, and I would think it's an amazing release. People, have said this on my other reviews, like the Lord of the Rings 4K review that I did last year, that I'm nitpicking too much. But for me, why should we be letting these companies get a free pass on not doing the best that they could do? Even if this version of the thing is now the best version that we have on home video, which I think it is, it's still not as good as it could have been. They've dropped the ball, and overall it isn't an excellent disc. It's not anywhere near a perfect disc, and it's just a shame, because who knows when we will ever get a better version than this. Potentially never, because for many people this is now the pinnacle. 4K might be the last home video format, and this might be the last restoration and remix that the film ever gets. So it's a shame. It's a real shame, and I feel it's my duty to be as transparent as possible to you guys so that you are able to inform your purchasing decision. Because if you're like me and you might notice these things, then it's good to know about it before you go and buy. The last thing to really talk about is the special features on the disc. There's an audio commentary with John Carpenter. There is a featurette on the thing, and there's some outtakes. That's about it. So in terms of comparing it to the Arrow video release from a few years ago, that has way more substantial, meat to the special features. So if you've got that Arrow video release already, you may not want to get rid of that in place of this. You might want to own both of them. I know I certainly will keep around the old disc just for the special features and the presentation. So that is my review for The Thing on 4K. To conclude, it's a decent disc, but with some really glaring issues, particularly the freezing on certain players and those audio issues that I mentioned. It is probably the best the film has ever looked, and it is probably the best edition to have on home video just for the presentation of the film. It's just a damn shame it wasn't made better by fixing those certain issues, and hopefully Universal do a replacement program for the people that are having this issue with the freezing on their players. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches my videos and supports the channel. It really means a lot to me that you've subscribed to the channel, so thank you very much for that. I'll be back very soon with more 4K reviews and Criterion videos, etc. So until then, stay well and keep watching great films.